rugged beauty of Afghanistan as winter approaches. But this is a country that's endured 3 years of an ugly war. In the last days of 1979, Soviet forces moved into Afghanistan to prop up the regime of communist leader Babrak Karmal. There are now said to be over 100,000 Soviet troops inside the country. Their enemy, bands of Afghan tribesmen, Muslim fanatics for the most part, who have sworn to drive the Soviets and communism out of their homeland. Our film crew was recently taken into Afghanistan by a rebel group to bring back these pictures. At the end of November, the UN General Assembly met to debate the Afghanistan issue.
The delegation of the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan would like from the outset to point out that it considers the submission of this draft resolution to be a gross violation of the United Nations Charter and an outright and flagrant interference in the internal affairs of a member state.
The Afghan delegate was rejecting a resolution calling for the immediate withdrawal of all foreign troops. In other words, Soviet troops from Afghanistan. The resolution was approved by a large majority, a clear political setback for the Soviet Union.
114 in favor, 21 opposed, and 13 abstentions. The draft resolution has been adopted.
One of the countries most concerned about seeing a political solution and an end to the war is Pakistan. Refugee camps have mushroomed on its long border with Afghanistan, as guerrillas and civilians alike have fled from the Soviet and Afghan government troops. Officials say Pakistan now holds 1.8 million refugees. That's almost 1/5 of the entire Afghan population. And Pakistan, in spite of its goodwill toward the refugees, does not want them to become a permanent problem here. Pakistan's President Zia has been visiting a number of world capitals recently, and the Afghan issue has figured prominently in his talks. During a stopover in India, he was asked whether he thought the change of leadership in Moscow could lead to a new initiative.
Afghanistan is a political problem, and we have to find a political solution. While I have always said that the key lies in Moscow, but I think there has to be a joint effort to find a solution to this problem.
A cautious response from President Zia, though he is known to support a United Nations plan for a new coalition government, including rebel factions in Kabul, leading to a phased withdrawal of Soviet troops. Early morning inside Afghanistan, our group of rebels prepare to face another day on patrol. Breakfast is always the same, a meager diet on which these tough mountain men appear to thrive. The drink is always tea. The food, a bread dough deep fried in fat. And that's all. First, a lookout checks that there is no sign of their enemy. The more remote valleys are generally safe from attack by Soviet or Afghan ground troops, which need good roads to carry their vehicles. But there's always a danger from the air, from jet fighters or helicopters. But today the coast is clear. The patrol sets off toward the hills. They walk an average of 30 kilometers a day. These guerrillas belong to a group calling itself the Islamic Unity of Afghanistan. The group's leadership assigned 10 of the men to be our guards. Several others accompanied us for 2 days and then continued on their own on a special mission. We were not given any details. Between the Pakistani border and the Kunar River lies the village of Saul. It used to be home for hundreds of families, but now it's completely deserted. Several of the buildings have been hit by bombs and rockets. The air raids forced the villagers to flee eastwards to the refugee camps in Pakistan, and the ruins now provide only temporary shelter for the Mujaheddin. The Islamic Unity of Afghanistan is the second largest of all the Afghan rebel groups. There are 10 in all, though 7 of them have joined together in a loose coalition. All are strictly Muslim and have the same basic aims: an end to Soviet influence and the installation of an Islamic government in Kabul. The Islamic Revolution in Iran, which has a long border with Afghanistan, serves as their example. It's religious fervor that drives them on. The guerrilla band continues its trek westwards, the danger increasing with every step as they reach the Kunar River. It's a swift-flowing river, and it's only possible to walk across it in the summer months. In winter, a raft is the best way to the other bank. The rebels are completely at home here. They have learned to live in this wild terrain from the moment they were born. They have a way of life which is centuries old, and they find a communist way of life imposed by successive governments in Kabul since a coup in 1978 completely alien to their culture. Once across the Kunar River, the rebels unload their equipment and penetrate further into what they regard as occupied territory. Their only weapons are rifles. Some are their own personal possessions, some have been captured from the Russians, and others bought in Pakistan by their exiled leaders. Their enemy drops bombs and rockets from the sky, though the aim is usually haphazard. The Afghan resistance accuses the Soviet Union of using terror tactics to drive away the civilian population in outlying areas so as to deny the guerrillas food and shelter. We were shown an array of Soviet rockets and other weapons collected by the rebels, including bombs which looked like toys, and small darts with a deadly poison on their tips.
After usage,
there's a bag of wheat, which is also said to be poisoned.
It's poisoned, huh? Poisoned wheat.
The Americans also allege the use of nerve gas by the Soviet Union.
We have received 2 gas masks used by Soviet forces in Afghanistan. Analysis of the surface of one of these gas masks has revealed the presence of T2 mycotoxin. These results have been confirmed by 2 other laboratories. Similar analysis of material from the other Soviet gas mask, which was removed from the head of a dead Soviet soldier in Afghanistan, revealed the presence of mycotoxins as well. We believe accordingly that these masks were worn by Soviet soldiers during operations in Afghanistan in which a toxin agent was used.
The Soviet Union flatly rejects the charges that it has used poison chemicals and toxins. But it cannot deny that it has lost hundreds of troops in this war. The rebels hold their personal possessions and their identity papers. It's not just equipment they've captured. They hold a number of Soviet prisoners, too, although the Pakistani authorities have refused permission for them to be taken back across their border. This prisoner refused to answer any questions. The Soviet Union claims it sent its troops into Afghanistan only at the request of a friendly neighbor. In later 1980, the new Afghan leader, Babrak Karmal, was warmly received in Moscow by the late President Brezhnev. Karmal succeeded the previous communist head of state, Hasifullah Amin, who was murdered, allegedly in a Soviet-engineered coup. Karmal heads a beleaguered government in Kabul. The Muslim rebels control large areas of the countryside and have even launched attacks inside the capital. There is also the long-standing political rift in the People's Democratic Party. Karmal's ruling Parcham, or Flag faction, is at loggerheads with the Kalk, or Masses faction. The Soviets are making every effort to show that the regime is stable and popular. These pictures, made available by Soviet television, show young Afghan pioneers, a youth movement, fraternizing with Soviet soldiers and officers in Kabul. Soviet soldiers helped to build the pioneers' headquarters. Moscow would like to rebuild the whole country along modern socialist lines, but only a minority of Afghans seem to agree. The Karmal regime is making efforts to improve its image. It organized a press conference in Kabul to support its claims that the rebels are financed and encouraged by the West, which it says provides large amounts of money and arms through secret channels. The American CIA is singled out for attack. The Americans support the rebels, it's claimed, solely to embarrass Moscow. This exclusive film, shot during last winter, shows one of the rebel attacks near Kabul against a military convoy. They attacked with an anti-tank rocket and firearms. After the convoy had been halted with a direct hit, the Mujaheddin closed in from all sides, showing no mercy to the Soviet and Afghan soldiers caught in the crossfire. From the guerrillas' point of view, everything went perfectly, and they swarmed over the vehicles looking for souvenirs. They also pursued and captured a few prisoners, and after brief consultations, 2 of them, identified as an Afghan and a Soviet soldier, were taken into a field. Prisoners can be an embarrassment to guerrillas on the move. The decision was taken to execute them. The latest claims from rebel sources say over 100 Afghans were burned to death when Soviet troops destroyed an underground hiding place after pouring in inflammable liquid. And a village of 1,000 homes near the Pakistani border is said to have been razed to the ground in retaliation for the killing of 70 Afghan Special Force members a month before. 12 months later, and the guerrillas plan another patrol in search of their enemy. The guerrillas have lost none of their determination, and they continue to inflict casualties on the Soviet forces. 2 weeks before our visit, a convoy of Soviet trucks was caught by surprise by the Kunar River as it attempted to push into rebel-controlled territory. All the personnel were killed, and none were buried. It's a war without mercy. These hard men of the mountains, religious fanatics, and implacable foes of communism are now facing their 3rd winter of war. They can defend their mountains, and they can kill more Soviet and government troops with their hit-and-run tactics. They cannot hope for an outright military victory, but they have vowed never to give up the fight until the Soviets leave.